Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs and cats, dragons of all ages, and welcome back to my countdown to Star Wars Episode 9 with my review of Star Wars Rogue One. Released in December of 2016, Rogue One was technically the second official Star Wars spin-off that would be seen in theaters, with Clone Wars having been released in 2008. One of the first things that separated this movie from the others was its lack of a title scroll. Instead, the movie opts for Prologue that cuts to the title card before we get a time skip to what is roughly a few weeks before the events of Episode 4. While admittedly it was disappointing not to see the familiar intro, it's not a change that bothered me enough to count it as a mark against the film. In the prologue, we meet our main protagonist, Jyn Erso, and her family, as well as our main antagonist, Director Krennic. Krennic has arrived to recruit Jyn's father to work on a super weapon he's been building. He and his band of death troopers kill Jyn's mother after she shoots Krennic in the shoulder and take her father. Krennic sends the troopers to find Jyn, who has run off and hidden in a secret bunker her father built. She waits in the bunker until she is received by Saw Gerrera, a name that will probably be familiar to those who watched the Clone Wars. We then jump years into the future, where Jyn has grown up and been imprisoned by the Empire. She is sprung from her imprisonment by a group of rebels who have received intel that her father has entrusted the delivery of a message for Saw Gerrera to a pilot defecting from the Empire. The rebels themselves are not on speaking terms with Saw and want Jyn to be their way in so they can learn her father's location and extract him. She is sent along with one of their spies, Cassian Andor, and his reprogrammed robot, K2SO. Little does she know that Cassian has been given orders to kill her father when they find him. They arrive at the planet Jedha, where Saw has set up his base camp in search for a means of reaching him. Jyn runs into Kirit and Baze, two guardians of the Wills who once guarded the temple on Jedha that housed kyber crystals that are currently being harvested by the Empire. Jyn and Cassian are caught up in a firefight between Saw's rebels and the Empire and are almost captured before Kirit and Baze come to their rescue. They are then captured by Saw's rebels and taken to him so he can speak with Jyn, which reveals part of their backstory with each other before showing her the message her father had sent with the pilot. Her father reveals that Krennic took him to work on the Death Star and reveals that he has created a crippling weakness in the battle station. However, above the planet, the Death Star has been moving into position to test its super laser on the old kyber crystal temple. The super weapon fires at a fraction of its power and devastates the city, creating a tidal wave of destruction. Jyn, Cassian, and the rest, including the defecting pilot, escape, but Saw stays behind because reasons. Plus, let's face it, he wasn't getting out in time on those peg legs anyway. I would question their ability to jump to hyperspace while still in Jedha's atmosphere, but my research has concluded that it isn't impossible considering that the rules of hyperspace have never been thoroughly fleshed out in lore. So for now, I'll let it slide. Jyn and Cassian go to the Imperial facility her father is being held at, with Jyn moving to try and rescue her father and Cassian moving to assassinate him. Just as he's about to fire, Cassian has a change of heart, though, and doesn't shoot. But it is too late, as the rebels have ordered an airstrike on the facility, and one of the bombs kills Jyn's father. The group then returns to the rebel base on Yavin 4, where they discuss if they should attack Scarif to retrieve the battle plans to the Death Star. The rebels decide against the attack, but Jyn and her new group of friends, along with some Commandos Cassian recruits, go on their own mission to retrieve the plans. Using a stolen transport and some stolen uniforms, Jyn, Cassian, and K2 infiltrate the base while the Commandos set up to launch an attack on the base to cause a distraction. After the attack begins, K2 is forced to lock Jyn and Cassian within the vault as he is overwhelmed by stormtroopers and killed. After learning of the vault break-in, Krennic goes to investigate after sending his Death Trooper squad out to the battlefield. Jyn and Cassian retrieve the plans and climb to a higher level in order to reach the satellite dish on top of the building and transmit the plans to Admiral Raddus, who has come to aid their attack on the base. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Bodhi, the pilot, tells Kirit and Baze they need to activate a master switch so he can contact Raddus's fleet and tell them to disable the shield above the base so the plans can be transmitted. Kirit activates the switch but is killed shortly after. Baze then eliminates the Death Troopers but is taken out by a grenade. Bodhi is similarly taken out after giving instructions to Raddus. On top of the tower, Jyn is confronted by Krennic, who is shot in the shoulder by Cassian. They transmit the plans to Raddus's ship just as the Death Star, commanded by Grand Moff Tarkin, exits light speed above the base. Tarkin orders the Death Star to fire upon the base, killing Krennic, Jyn, and Cassian. Above the planet, the rebel fleet attempts to escape but is intercepted by the Devastator. Raddus's ship is disabled and boarded, but the rebels manage to get the plans aboard the Tantive 4, which was docked to Raddus's ship for some reason. I'll get into that later. So overall, I would say Star Wars Rogue One is a decent film, although there are a few issues that I have with it. For instance, you'll probably find that the first two-thirds of the film are really slow and sort of unnecessary. By that I mean that someone could probably jump into this movie during the scene where the rebels debate whether they should or shouldn't attack Scarif, and you wouldn't be missing out on all that much. The first two-thirds do allow viewers to become familiar with the characters, but even that is not handled the best. Kira and Baze are the two I feel have the most story and personality to the characters, and K2 is enjoyable thanks to a great performance by Alan Tudyk. The pilot Bodhi, unfortunately, doesn't get enough of a spotlight to make him super memorable to me. As for Cassian and Jin, they're both sort of bland and seem prone to almost sporadic character change. At the beginning of the film, Jin simply doesn't care who is in charge of the galaxy. All she wants is to rescue her father. After his death, she changes and tells the rebels that rebellions are built on hope. To some degree, this change makes sense given that her father risked and ultimately gave his life to take down the Empire's superweapon, and Jin probably feels the need to fulfill that goal so his sacrifice wasn't in vain. However, the rebels also put out a kill order on him and are the ones who killed him, so I feel she gets over her resentment towards them rather fast, especially since the kill order wasn't even an official order but was one rebel officer acting on his own. Or at least that's what I gathered from watching the movie. Personally, I would have liked more resolution to this than there was given, such as having the rogue officer imprisoned or still having Jin be resentful towards the rebels but begrudgingly puts it aside to achieve a greater goal. Cassian also sort of suffers from this, as when he goes to assassinate Galen or so, he just decides not to. I guess his conversations with Jin during the mission are supposed to have made him change his mind about following his orders from the one commander, but I don't think it's made very clear. Before his refusal to kill Galen, we never see anything that would indicate that he's questioning his orders. In fact, it's only after her father's death that Jin confronts him and calls him out for following orders like a stormtrooper, which ultimately makes his character change feel out of place. Otherwise, he just seems like a typical gruff soldier who wants to take down the Empire. So as of this movie, there's nothing about him as a character that stands out to me. It may have been interesting if they'd included a flashback to when he was a child, as he mentions that he's been in the rebellion since he was 6 years old. And that might have been interesting to see, but they don't do that, so that all they do is tell us about it. Now, some of you may be wondering what my thoughts on the return of Tarkin are, and I liked it. I thought the CGI was extremely well done considering what they were trying to accomplish. I will admit there are a few moments where the mouth movements look a little weird, but if I had been unaware of the passing of Peter Cushing, as well as the time gap between releases, I probably would have thought it was the real person. As for the ethicality of bringing back dead actors, I definitely don't want it to become common practice. But I think if it's done for certain characters in established franchises, then I am okay with it so long as it is done with the proper respect. Although if you can achieve the same thing with makeup and prosthetics, such as with Gary Oldman in Darkest Hour, I think that would certainly be preferable. Another thing worth mentioning is the soundtrack. While they didn't bring in John Williams, Michael Giacchino does a good job replicating Williams' style, giving the music a very natural Star Wars feel. My three personal favorite tracks from this album are Guardians of the Whills, The Imperial Suite, and Hope. Now for the things I would change. While I'm not sure how I would do it, I would try to change up those first two-thirds so they don't feel as slow and perhaps make it a bit more pertinent to the ending. I might even get rid of a character or two so the screen time doesn't have to be divided amongst so many people. Really the only other thing I would change is I would have a ship other than the Tantive 4 escape with the plans, and I would have the movie end probably about 30 seconds sooner. I would change this because the last 30 seconds are completely unnecessary, and the presence of Leia and the Tantive 4 create a bit of a plot hole in Episode 4. In Episode 4, when Vader captures her ship, Leia claims that they are on a diplomatic mission to Alderaan. The issue is that Vader, and at the very least the command crew of his Star Destroyer, saw and probably recorded the Tantive 4's presence and escape from Scarif. And okay, so it's not necessarily a plot hole, but it sure makes her defense flimsy if not non-existent. If another ship had escaped with the plans and then transmitted them to her, because she was the closest ally ship, then her claims would have more credibility. Plus, why was she even at Scarif in the first place? Bail Organa's last scene is him saying he's sending her to find Obi-Wan Kenobi. And even if Scarif is on the way to Tatooine, why would she risk the potentially deadly detour, especially if she wants to be able to deny affiliation with the rebels in the event of her capture? If you wish to defend Leia's presence at the battle, that's fine, but I still feel it was an unnecessary cameo when the movie could have ended on the perfect high note. Speaking of which, it is time to discuss the ultimate redeemer that makes up for any and all of this movie's flaws. Darth Vader. After an 11-year absence from theater screens, the most iconic villain in cinema history returns and is given one of the greatest scenes in any Star Wars movie. Needless to say, I love this scene. I remember sitting in the theater, hearing that mechanical breathing, seeing the crimson lightsaber ignite, and wanting to scream in equal parts terror and joy as Vader absolutely slaughters the rebel soldiers. Never before have I ever been so happy to see the good guys get decimated. This entire sequence is a perfect representation of why Vader is such a great villain. So that is my review of Star Wars Rogue One. Overall, I think it is a good film, especially if you don't mind the slower pace of those first 2/3. Tune in next month as I will be discussing Disney's first Star Wars TV show, Rebels. So until then, I am Wolf Fury 501, and I will see you next time.